30 years. My father gave that house 30 years, every shelf, every stair, every window frame worked by his own hands, and I was there for every step of it. That great master, that towering oak of a man, taught me everything he knew. God rest his soul. My brother Desmond never set foot in that house once. Then my father died. No will. My boys will sort it fair. He used to say that's the kind of man he was, so clean, so honest he trusted his own blood. But he never accounted for one thing, my brother. And on a Thursday morning, at 9 o'clock sharp, standing in the driveway with the truck I'd rented to save that house, I watched through the front window as my brother sold my father's 30 years to a stranger. Everything in me wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just said, "Okay, dear." Because what I felt wasn't anger, it was something colder, something more patient. My brother thought that house was an asset. I knew every joint of wood in it, and that difference was going to cost him everything. Welcome back to Patriarch's revenge. Settle in. This one's a slow burn worth every minute. Smash that like button and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Say hello to the others down there. This crew always shows up for each other. Subscribe and be one of us so you never miss a story. You found the right place. The auctioneer's van was already there. My brother Desmond was inside, in Dad's living room, shaking hands with a man in a blazer, and there was a little sign staked in the lawn I'd mowed 1,000 times as a kid. Estate auction, Saturday, everything must go. I got out of the truck. I walked up the porch steps. The third one still creaked. 40 years and Desmond never fixed it either, and I opened the door I still had a key to. My brother looked up and smiled like I was a delivery. "Sally, you're early. Auction's not till Saturday. You said we'd talk before you did anything." "We talked." He hadn't stopped smiling. "You talked. I listened. Then I made a decision because somebody had to, and you were never going to." He gestured around the room, Dad's chair, Mom's china cabinet, the piano nobody could play but nobody would sell. "It all goes Saturday. Then the house. I've already got a buyer lined up for the property after the contents clear. This is Dad's house." "Dad's dead, Sully." He said it lightly, like a weather report. "It's an asset now, and you're standing in my asset. Let me tell you about the house before I go on, because otherwise this is just two brothers fighting over furniture. My name is Sullivan Roarke. I'm 53 years old. My father built it. Not the way people say built, when they mean bought new. He built it. Rock men were carpenters going back further than anyone kept track of, and Dad framed that house with his own hands in 1971, and he did the finish work over the next 30 years the way you tend a garden. A built-in bookshelf here, a window seat there, a banister he turned on a lathe in the garage the winter I was 9. I know every joint in that house, because I was the one who handed him the tools. Once I was 9 years old. He was turning a handrail baluster on the lathe in the garage in the middle of winter. His hands were freezing. His breath turned to steam in the air, but he didn't stop. Shivering from the cold, I stood beside him holding the flashlight. "Why now, Dad? Can't we do it tomorrow?" I asked. He didn't even look at me. He stroked the wood, ran his finger over that crack, and said, "Wood doesn't like to wait, son. It tells you when to touch it, not you." We stayed there for 4 hours that night. I couldn't feel my fingers, but I had never felt more in the right place in my life. Desmond was not. Desmond was 4 years older and had decided by the time he was 14 that sawdust was beneath him. He went to the city, went into what he called asset management, which as far as I could ever tell meant moving other people's money around and taking a slice as it passed. I stayed. I became a carpenter, like Dad, like every rock. I was never rich, but I could walk into any room in that house and tell you which year Dad built it just by the joinery. And here's the part that put the auction sign in the lawn. Dad died in March, and there was no will. I know how that sounds. A careful man, a man who measured twice and cut once his whole life, and no will. But Dad was old-fashioned in a way that turned out to be a trap. He used to say, "It'll go to my boys. They'll sort it fair." He trusted us to sort it fair. He did not account for Desmond. No will means the estate splits 50-50. The house, the land, the contents. Half mine, half my brother's. Which sounds simple until you understand what half a house actually means, because you can't saw a house down the middle. Somebody has to buy the other out, or you sell the whole thing and split the cash. I wanted to buy Desmond out. I'd spent 6 weeks getting my finances in a row, a small business loan against my carpentry shop, everything I had. I could just barely cover his half at a fair number. Desmond didn't want a fair number. Desmond wanted an auction, because an auction meant strangers bidding, a buyer already lined up, the whole thing liquidated to cash he could pocket by month's end. And it meant something else, something I didn't fully understand until I was standing in that living room watching him smile. It meant I'd have to bid, for my own father's house, against my own brother, in public. And Desmond had done the math on what I could afford down to the dollar, because that's what Desmond does. He'd seen my loan paperwork when I'd naively shown it to him as a good faith offer, and he knew my ceiling. He was going to make me bid to the edge of everything I had, and then bid $1 more, and take the house, and watch me lose it in front of the whole town. That was the plan. I saw it whole, standing on the creaking third step. And I want to tell you what I felt, because it wasn't what he expected. I felt calm. Because Desmond had made one mistake, the same mistake he'd made his whole life. He thought the house was an asset. I knew it was a house, and I knew every joint in it, and he didn't know a single one. I didn't argue with him in that living room. That was the first thing. Everything in me wanted to. 40 years of little brother wanted to grab him by the collar and put him through Mom's china cabinet. But I'd learned something on job sites over 30 years. You never let the other guy see you measure. You let him think you're just standing there. Then you cut. So I said, "Okay, Dad." He blinked. "Okay. You're right. I can't stop the auction. It's half yours. You want it liquid. That's your right." I looked around the room one more time, slow, like I was saying goodbye. "I'll be there Saturday. I'll bid what I can. If I lose it, I lose it." And I watched my brother relax. I watched him decide he'd won. Because a man like Desmond has spent his whole life reading people, and he'd just read me as beaten, and being right about people is the thing he loves more than money. "That's mature of you," he said. "I try." I walked back out to my rented truck, and I sat in it for a while. And then I did not drive to the bank to arrange my losing bid. I drove to the County Historical Society. Here's what I knew that Desmond didn't. Our town had a preservation ordinance, passed in the 80s, back when they were tearing down the old mill district, and a bunch of retired folks got angry about it. The ordinance said that any structure of documented historical or architectural significance, more than 50 years old, could be nominated for a local landmark designation. And a landmark designation changes everything about a property. You can't just tear it down. You can't just sell it to a developer to flip. The buyer Desmond had lined up for after the auction, the one who wanted the land, not the house. That buyer wanted to scrape the lot and put up 2 units. A landmark designation makes that illegal. Dad's house was 54 years old. And I was about to prove of documented architectural significance. Because here's the thing about a carpenter who works alone for 30 years. I'd spent my whole childhood watching Dad, and I'd spent my whole adulthood realizing what he actually was. Dad wasn't just a carpenter. Dad was one of the last men in the region who did true traditional timber joinery, hand-cut mortise and tenon, wooden pegs, no nails in the frame, a technique that was basically extinct. There were preservation people who drive 4 hours to photograph a barn built the way Dad built our whole house. I'd never told anyone. Dad never told anyone. It was just how we did things. But it was documentable, and I could document it. I want to be careful here, because I could feel the temptation, and the temptation is the trap. The temptation was to go to Desmond and say, "I can landmark this house and kill your developer, so deal with me." Threaten him, force the buyout. And if I'd done that, Desmond would have done what Desmond does. He'd raced to close the sale before any designation could go through, or lawyered up, or found the loophole. You never tell a man like my brother what you have. You let him find out when it's already done. So I didn't threaten him. I did something quieter. I spent the next 11 days documenting my father's house. I photographed every joint. I measured the frame. I found the Historical Society's timber framing expert, a woman named Enid Castellan who'd been trying to catalog vanishing regional techniques for 30 years, and I brought her out to the house on a day I knew Desmond was in the city. She walked into the front room and stopped dead. She put her hand on the exposed beam over the doorway. Dad had left it exposed on purpose. He was proud of it, and she went quiet for a long time. "Who built this?" she said finally. "My father." "When?" 1971. Finished the interior over about 30 years after. She ran her fingers along the joint where the beam met the post. No metal. Just wood locked into wood the way it had been done for 500 years. "Mr. Roach," she said, "do you understand what this is?" "I understand my father built it. This is scribe-rule timber framing, hand-cut. I have driven to 3 states to photograph joints that aren't as clean as this one." She looked at me. "And you're telling me a man did an entire house like this by himself into the 2000s? The whole frame, and the built-ins, and the stair." Enid Castellan took out her phone and started taking pictures, and her hands were not quite steady, and she said, "I need you to tell me nobody is planning to touch this house." And I said, "Somebody's planning to auction it Saturday and sell the lot to a developer." She stopped photographing. "Over my dead body," she said. "Now here's where the timing became everything, and timing is the whole job, whether you're framing a house or taking one back. A landmark nomination doesn't happen overnight. It goes to a review board, there are hearings, it takes months. I did not have months, I had until Saturday. But there was one piece of the ordinance I'd read very carefully, sitting in the Historical Society with a cup of bad coffee. And it was this. Once a property is formally nominated for landmark status, the moment the paperwork is filed and accepted for review, the property enters something called interim protection, a 90-day hold. During that window, the property cannot be materially altered, demolished, or transferred pending the board's decision. Cannot be transferred. An auction is a transfer. If I filed a complete, credible nomination before Saturday, and it was accepted for review, not approved, just accepted, the auction couldn't legally close. The sale would freeze for 90 days. And in 90 days, a lot can happen. In 90 days, a developer with a scrape-the-lot plan walks away because his whole model depends on speed. In 90 days, an auctioneer's buyer lined up evaporates. In 90 days, a brother who wanted cash by month's end is looking at a house he legally cannot sell, cannot alter, and cannot develop. A house that is now worth less on the open market to everyone except the one person who wants it whole. May. It had helped me file the nomination on Friday afternoon. It was accepted for review at 4:15 p.m. The auction was Saturday at 10. I did not tell Desmond. I want to sit on that because it's the part I'm proudest of and the part a younger man could never have done. Every cell in my body wanted to call him Friday night and say it's over, I froze the sale, you lose. The confrontation, the vindication. But I'd learned that the confrontation is where you lose the advantage because it hands the other man time to react. And there was still one thing I wanted. I didn't just want the house. I wanted Desmond to stand in front of the whole town on Saturday and lose it in public, the exact humiliation he'd planned for me. I wanted him to run his auction, work his little crowd, savor his win, and then find out, in front of everyone, that the asset he'd been so proud of liquidating had turned to stone in his hands. So Saturday morning, I showed up. I parked the same rented truck in the same driveway. I walked up the same steps, creek on the 3rd, and I stood at the back of the crowd in Dad's front yard, and I let my brother see me there, looking beaten. He came over before it started, magnanimous in victory, a paper cup of coffee in his hand. "You came," he said. "I respect that, Sully. Takes a big man to show up and watch. Wouldn't miss it. You still going to bed?" "I'm going to try," I said quietly. "Don't know if I can win it." And Desmond put his hand on my shoulder, the way he had when I was small, and he said the thing that told me he deserved every bit of what was coming. "Probably better if you don't, honestly," he said. "Clean break. You've got to stop living in the past, Sully. It's just a building. Just a building. 54 years of our father's hands. And my brother called it just a building, and stood in the yard our dad had graded by hand and prepared to sell it to a man who wanted to knock it down. "You're probably right," I said. And the auctioneer stepped up to the microphone. "I'm going to give you the auction the way it happened, because I want you to have every second of it." The auctioneer, the blazer man, name of Prentice, started with the contents. The furniture, the china, Dad's tools. And that was hard, I won't lie. Watching strangers put numbers on Mom's cabinet, I stood at the back and I let it happen because the contents weren't the fight. The house was the fight. Desmond worked the crowd the whole time, shaking hands, playing host. He'd invited people, actual invitations. He'd made it an event, my father's life sold off as a Saturday social. There were maybe 60 people in that yard. And then Prentice said, "All right, folks, that brings us to the property itself, the house and lot. We'll open the bidding at." And a woman's voice, clear and carrying, came from near the porch. "I'm sorry to interrupt." It was Enid Castellan. I'd asked her to be there. I hadn't told her exactly when to speak, but she'd been a preservationist for 30 years, and she knew a moment when she saw one. Prentice frowned. "Ma'am, if you want to bid, you'll need a—" "I'm not here to bid." She held up a folder. "I'm here from the County Historical Commission. This property was nominated for landmark designation yesterday afternoon. The nomination was accepted for review at 4:15 p.m. She let that sit. "Which means, as of yesterday, this property is under interim protection. It cannot be transferred, sold, altered, or demolished for 90 days, pending the board's decision." The yard went very quiet. Prentice looked at his paperwork like it might help him. It did not help him. Desmond pushed forward out of the crowd. "That's not, you can't just, this is a scheduled auction. You're welcome to hold the auction," Enid said pleasantly. "You simply can't complete the sale. Any transfer during the interim period is void. I have the county filing right here, and I've keyed the auction house's counsel, who I suspect is already calling." And Prentice's phone, in his blazer pocket, began to ring. I watched my brother's face do the whole thing. First confusion, then the fast recalculation. I'd seen it my whole life. Desmond running the numbers behind his eyes, looking for the angle, the loophole, the fast close, and then slowly the understanding that there wasn't one. Because interim protection isn't a lawsuit you fight or a bid you outrun. It's a hold. It just sits there. And his developer, standing near the driveway, I watched the man check his watch, turn, and walk to his car. Because a developer's whole model is speed, and 90 days of maybe is a no. Desmond turned and found me at the back of the crowd. He said, "I didn't say anything. You did this." Louder now. And here's the thing, now he was making the scene. The public scene he'd built this whole day to inflict on me, and he was making it himself, in front of his 60 invited guests. "You went behind my back and—" "What? You got the house declared a monument." "I didn't declare anything," I said, and I kept my voice low, because the lower I went the louder he got, and the louder he got the worse he looked. "The county's reviewing it. I just gave them what they needed." Which is what? And this was the moment. This was the joint the whole thing locked into. "The truth about who built it," I said. "Dad did hand-cut scribe-rule timber framing by himself into the 2000s. There's maybe a handful of houses like it left in the state." I looked at the beam over the front door, visible through the open doorway. "You've walked under that beam your whole life, dear. You never once looked up." Desmond didn't know what scribe. "This is a stunt," he said. "This is, you can't even afford the house, Sullivan. That's the whole point. That's why and he stopped. "That's why I ran it as an auction." He almost said it, in front of everyone. "That's why I built the whole day around making my brother bid past his limit and lose it in public." He heard himself getting there and he stopped, but half the yard had already followed him to the end of the sentence. And that's when the day fully turned, because people are not stupid. And 60 people had just watched a man throw his brother an auction to humiliate him and get caught doing it. I let the silence do the work. Enid stood by the porch with her folder. Prentice was on his phone 20 feet away saying, "I understand. in the voice of a man being told he does not, in fact, get paid today. And I walked up to my brother, close, so I didn't have to raise my voice, and I said the only thing I'd planned in advance. Here's where we are there. The sale's frozen 90 days. Your developer just drove off. In 90 days this house is either a protected landmark you legally cannot develop, sell to a flipper, or alter, or it's off the registry and worth what it's worth to somebody who actually wants it. I let that breathe. There's exactly one buyer in the world who wants this house standing, whole, every joint intact. You're looking at him. And after today, my number just went down, because you've got nothing else to do with it. I stepped back. You wanted it liquid, I said. Congratulations. It's the least liquid house in the county now. Come find me when you're ready to sell your half to the one man who will pay you for a house instead of a lot. And that's where we'll leave it. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? If you were in Sullivan's shoes, watching your brother sell your father's life's work out from under you, would you have done the same? Did he go too far freezing that sale in front of the whole town? Or did his brother have it coming?